Tolu stood in the middle of the village square just before dawn, her perfect white teeth catching the first rays of sunlight as she smiled. The men stared at her like she was a goddess sent from heaven. She was beautiful in ways that made you forget how to breathe, her dark, flawless skin glowing, her curves making even the old men remember their youth. But her eyes always seemed to linger a second too long, like she was watching something deeper than just the person in front of her. By the time the sun was high in the sky, the village began to whisper. Another young man had gone missing. This time it was Keod, the blacksmith's son. He hadn't come home after his usual evening walk by the river. People murmured that he had been seen talking to Tolu the day before, laughing with her near the market. The elders called it a coincidence. They said people were always disappearing in times like this. But the younger men, the ones who were drawn to Tolu like moths to a flame, didn't care about the whispers. They were too busy fighting for her attention. That was how it started. Just whispers. But they grew louder with every missing man. Tolu arrived in the village only a few weeks ago. No one knew exactly where she came from. She said she was from a neighboring town, but no one had ever heard of it. And yet, when she walked into the market on her first morning, people couldn't stop staring. She was impossibly elegant, with a soft voice that made you lean in to hear her better. The women envied her beauty, the men were drawn to her like iron to a magnet. Tolu knew it too. She had a way of tilting her head, smiling just enough to make your heart skip a beat, before walking away, leaving you desperate for more. Before her arrival, the village had been peaceful. Quiet. But now, men started disappearing one by one. First, it was Ode, the hunter. Then Femi, the trader's younger son. Each time, the pattern was the same. They'd been seen talking to Tolu the day before, and by morning, they were gone without a trace. The elders tried to explain it away. It's the forest, they said. Wild animals. Or perhaps they've run away to the city. But the villagers weren't convinced. The men who disappeared had no reason to leave. Their families were here. Their lives were here. And the strangest part. Each time a man vanished, vultures were seen circling the forest outside the village at dawn. One night, Adisa, the village storyteller, decided to follow her. He was young and braver than most, and he'd always had a sharp mind. He didn't trust Tolu, no matter how beautiful she was. Something about her felt wrong. So, when he saw her leaving her hut late one night, he waited until she was out of sight and crept after her. She moved quickly, slipping through the village like a shadow. Adisa struggled to keep up without making noise. She didn't take the main road. Instead, she went into the forest, deeper than anyone ever dared to go. The air grew colder the farther they went, and Adisa noticed something strange. No animals made a sound. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. Then she stopped. Adisa crouched behind a tree, trying to quiet the pounding of his heart. Tolu stood in a small clearing, her back to him. She was muttering something under her breath, words he didn't understand. And then, it happened. Her body began to change. Her smooth, dark skin rippled like the surface of water. Her arms stretched unnaturally, her fingers twisting into long, bony claws. Feathers erupted from her back, black and shiny, glinting in the moonlight. Her legs bent at impossible angles, her toes curling into talons. And her face. Adisa wanted to scream when he saw her face. Her beautiful features stretched and contorted until they were replaced by the sharp, hooked beak of a vulture. Tolu was gone. In her place stood a massive bird, its wings spreading wide as it let out a bone-chilling screech. Adisa pressed a hand over his mouth to keep from crying out. He watched as she flapped her wings once, twice, and took off into the night sky. Adisa didn't sleep that night. He stayed hidden in the forest until dawn, too afraid to go back to the village. When he finally returned, the sun was rising, and Tolu was already there, standing in the square, smiling as if nothing had happened. Her skin was flawless again, her eyes bright. She greeted him with a soft, "Good morning, Adisa," and he nearly collapsed from fear. He wanted to tell someone. He wanted to scream the truth to the entire village. But who would believe him? Tolu had bewitched everyone. Even now, as she walked through the market, the men followed her like dogs, desperate for her attention. That was when he made his decision. He had to stop her. That night, Adisa gathered everything he could: charms from the local herbalist, his father's old machete, and a small flask of holy water from the church in the next village. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to try. He couldn't let another man disappear. He waited outside her hut, hidden in the shadows. Just as before, she slipped out quietly and headed for the forest. Adisa followed, keeping his distance. His heart hammered in his chest, but he gripped the machete tightly, reminding himself why he was doing this. When she reached the clearing, she began to change again. Adisa forced himself to watch, even as bile rose in his throat. Her transformation was even more horrifying the second time. But this time, he wasn't going to just stand there. He stepped into the clearing, machete raised. "Tolu," he shouted. The creature froze, her glowing yellow eyes locking onto him. For a moment, there was silence. Then she smiled, a twisted, unnatural smile, and spoke in a voice that was no longer hers. "You shouldn't have come here, Adisa." She lunged at him, faster than he could react. Her talons scraped his arm as he stumbled back, swinging the machete wildly. He managed to strike her wing, and she let out a deafening screech, stumbling back. For a moment, he thought he had her. He reached for the holy water, but before he could open the flask, she was on him again. The last thing he saw was her big inches from his face. The next morning, the village was quiet. Too quiet. Tolu stood in the square, smiling as usual. But something was different. Her smile was wider than before, her eyes brighter. And in the forest, vultures echoed once again. No one ever found Adisa. But that didn't stop the whispers. Some said he had run away, like the others. Some said he had gone mad. But a few wondered if he had discovered the truth. And Tolu. She stayed in the village, smiling her perfect smile, waiting for the next man to fall into her trap. The end. Moral lesson. Not everything beautiful is good. Most times, the things that shine the brightest hide the darkest secrets. Tolu's story reminds us that blind attraction and unchecked desire can lead to destruction. Be cautious of who you trust, and don't let outward appearances blind you to the truth. Sometimes, the most dangerous predators wear the most attractive disguises. Keep your eyes open and your heart guarded, because not every smile is innocent, and not every stranger comes in peace. Please share this video and subscribe to grow the channel. See you in the next video.